Hello, I'm Robin Gibson, and this is the Harvard House Money Morsel. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the bell so you get a notification of when we release a new video. I'm sitting again today with Michael Porter. Morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you very much. So, Michael, there's an awful lot of stuff that's kind of in a holding pattern that we've spoken about: budget, inflation, Trump and Ramaphosa, etc. But there's not really anything meaty to talk about to update our positions. But in the meantime, life goes on, and we're in the middle of results season at the moment. So companies are kind of giving us an insight as to what's going on the ground. So I'd like to pick some of the highlights and let us know what we should be knowing about.
Yeah, Robin. I mean, corporate Canada continues to, regardless of what else is going on. You're quite right. Let's start with NVIDIA because that's probably the most widely watched stock in the whole world, I would think, at the moment. And they had results 2 nights ago. Revenues were up, or profits were up, sort of circa 80%. Which is eye-watering, and that was disappointing. So, I think, Robin, there's interesting things going on. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about AI, but I think, from our point of view, there's a lot of expectation baked into some of these stocks, and I think NVIDIA's got a lot of runway to go, and I don't think the AI story is over by any stretch of the imagination, and I think they're innovating and keeping on going. But there is a lot of there's a lot of upside baked into that valuation already, and I just think it's a sort of a reminder to investors that as much as there's a good story to tell, the valuation or the price that you pay for something is pretty important,
Yes.
And markets can get ahead of themselves and price a lot of stuff into a valuation, and then it takes a couple of years for that valuation to sort of unwind and for those expectations to be met. And I think in some ways we're there with NVIDIA now, and we're doing our offshore presentation in 10 days' time, and I think there's a slight maybe changing of the leadership in markets slightly, going on at the moment. So it's just interesting. I think that NVIDIA confirmed that there's still a lot happening in IT and things like that. But just to be a little bit more, I just think from an investment point of view, don't think that that's the only game in town, because it's not, and if you pay the wrong price for something, you can sit with it for quite a long time before it makes a profit for you. But I still think it's a great company. Robin, locally we've had all the mining companies report. Mining's in a tough space at the moment. Commodity prices are relatively flat. Costs have been escalating, and so obviously Anglo is going through its big reorganization at the moment, and Anglo Plat will be separated by the middle of the year. De Beers is a slightly more tricky situation, but they're selling off other assets. But it's actually interesting. All big three, Glencore maybe slightly excluded, but Rio Tinto, Anglo, and BHP are all transitioning towards copper. I mean, copper, they've all got iron ore and they've all got copper, and they've actually, Anglo and BHP have got fertilizer, for want of a better word, agri stuff. But you can see that's where the miners think that the world is going, and there's this big drive, and everybody was highlighting the push towards copper, and this is where our copper growth is, and this is what we're doing on copper. So I think that, probably remains a theme for the next 15 to 20 years, copper. There's just not enough of it around, and all the miners are trying to push little incremental projects, but it is a relatively tough space for copper. And I think one of the big unknowns actually in the commodity space at the moment is what's happening in China, but actually it's what's happening with American tariffs, because it's interesting, in America, copper price on COMEX is trading at higher price than the copper price in London, because they're factoring in a tariff, coming in on copper and aluminium and things like that. So the commodity markets are a little bit in flux. I don't see, it's not necessarily bad for miners if prices get pushed up a little bit, but it's just an interesting dynamic. But the big miners are solid, but commodity prices are generally expected to go sideways, I suppose, or maybe slightly down over the next couple of months. So that's not particularly helpful. Otherwise, we had some local companies. Bidcorp remains just a wonderful company, Robin. I mean, if you look at the charts of Bidcorp, they had this massive surge in revenue. I mean, it really accelerated because of inflation and post-COVID and things like that, where inflation helped to drive, especially on food, you're helping to drive extra revenue. That inflation's abating, their revenue growth is normalizing. But Bidcorp they operate in 33 countries around the world. They deliver food. I mean, even in Howick here, you see the Bidcorp Bid food trucks running up and down and everything around. And it's a great business. We think it's an absolutely core holding in portfolios. I mean, certainly for growth clients and things like that. So I think it's just nice to reaffirm that story. And I think, again, it's just the backing of a good management team that continue to deliver successively over time. And House of Bush had good results. Actually, volumes were down a little bit, but pricing is coming through, cost controls coming through. And I think even if you take that with Heineken overseas, there's a little bit of signs of life in the beer market, which is quite interesting. So it's quite nice to see some of those sort of stocks reacting. On the flip side, you had sort of results out of something like Motus yesterday, which is part of the old Imperial Group from quite a long time ago, and the share price was down 15%, and maybe again just a slight reminder that on the vehicle side and on the consumer side, things are we expect this recovery, but it does take a little bit of time to feed through. I think one of the very tricky things, just to digress for a moment, is the outlook for interest rates in this country. With the Fed changing their trajectory and the impact of tariffs in America probably pushing up inflation a little bit there. I think in America we might have one more rate cut this year, and that certainly reduces the SARB's flexibility. So we might have expected another 2 rate cuts in South Africa this year. If we don't get any more, it probably wouldn't be a surprise. We're hoping for one more, but we might not get any more. And that's I suppose where these global factors filter through to what's happening in our little corner of the world down here.
And Michael, results aside, there's also been, there's always corporate action. So we had 2 big announcements. Obviously, the one update on the Barloworld takeover, and then Process announcing a big deal as well.
Yeah, so Barlow's is interesting because they've had a buyout offer, but part of that buyout consortium was the CEO. So he was part of that consortium to buy out his own company, and that's sparked a lot of debate in markets about corporate governance and whether this, the CEO should have been part of that, or whether there was the right sort of Chinese walls in place. Anyway, the Barloworld board put out a long statement detailing all the sort of corporate governance thing that they had in place, and I'm not necessarily sure that they did much wrong, but there was this perception that maybe corporate governance wasn't followed. Anyway, the deal was voted down. It doesn't mean to say that as a shareholder you still can't tender your shares at 120. There's a sort of standby offer. It's a pretty complicated transaction, but yeah, I do think that it's. I think it's also a reminder, Robin, that deals get announced and share prices react, and so let's say that Barlows was being bought out at 120. And the share price got up to 110, 115. Now, if you're not a long-term, if you really believe in Barloworld for the long term, and you didn't like the deal, you might have held on. But sometimes, people say, well, why did you sell it early? Because you could have got 120. The deal doesn't always go through. The Bell buyout failed last year. Barlow's buyout has sort of essentially failed now. And, depending on your stance and things like that,
you can slump back.
You can be a little bit too greedy, or markets are dynamic things. So that's a sort of interesting. Process announced the acquisition of a company called Just Eat, or Just Eat Takeaway. It's one of the bigger food delivery sort of companies across Europe. And Process has really made. They've got another business called iFood. They've also got a stake in another business called Delivery Hero. And I think they really feel that they can consolidate some of the food delivery industry. They've done a huge amount of work in iFood, that's mainly in Brazil, and really push profitability. And I think if they can integrate this and demonstrate profitability, it would go a long way to unlocking some of the value. But I think the new management team at Process is really getting stuck in. This is a big acquisition. They've paid quite a high price for it, but they haven't paid an over-the-top price. It's high relative to where Just Eat was trading, but it's not high relative to where the rest of the sector's trading. So I think it's probably fair from that point of view. But if they can deliver on that, I think you're going to see some exciting I think there's some exciting times of Process coming in because
Yes.
Tencent's recovering and what's going on in China, but Process is actively working on their portfolio, and I think we're going to see quite a lot of activity in and around Process over the next couple of years. So we're very bullish on Process as there's still a lot of value to be unlocked there, which is interesting. Yeah, and then Nepi had results, Fortress had results. There's more results coming out next week. So yeah, I think it's also nice for the market to digest these results, to reaffirm that the story is on track. I mean, something like Fortress, which has got quite a local portfolio, they had solid results, and also just maybe reaffirms that there has been a bit of a lull this year, Robin. I think with Trump coming in, there's a bit of uncertainty's crept into the market. We've had a little bit of load shedding again, which has maybe taken a little bit of the shine off it, and maybe there's just a little bit of a circumspection sort of creeping back in. So we need to see some positivity coming back through to hopefully remind people that we're on track. And obviously the delay in the budget and things doesn't help. There's still a little bit of maybe uncertainty that's crept into the market recently, but we don't think that the long-term trajectory is unchanged. But it provides some opportunity, but corporate results certainly reaffirm that companies on the ground are making progress.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you for giving us and the viewers a deep insight into some of what comes across your desk and the team's desk. Thank you for joining us. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.